My husband and my mother-in-law poisoned me to steal my wealth after seeing my net worth. They thought I died. They frozen in court when they saw me walked in alive with my lawyer. Before I get full into this story, dear viewers, have you subscribed to this channel? Please kindly hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Also like and share this video to your loved ones. Now back to my story. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I am 42 years old, a fact I once reveled in, believing myself to be at the zenith of my life. My life had been, by all outward appearances, a meticulously crafted masterpiece of success and contentment. From my sprawling estate nestled in the Hamptons, a testament to years of relentless entrepreneurial spirit in tech, to my highly curated art collection and a wardrobe that whispered couture with every rustle, I had built an empire. My net worth, a figure I usually kept closely guarded, had recently soared past the $800 million mark after a strategic acquisition, a fact that would soon cast a long, dark shadow over my existence. I had, perhaps naively, shared this thrilling news with the two people I believed I could trust implicitly. My husband, Arthur, and his mother, Beatrice. Arthur, with his charming smile and seemingly unwavering devotion, had swept me off my feet 5 years ago. He was a struggling artist then, and I, captivated by his passion and gentle demeanor, had been more than happy to support his dreams. We lived a life of comfortable luxury, one that I had always attributed to my own hard work and foresight. Beatrice, a woman whose stern gaze I had often mistaken for wisdom, had always presented herself as a doting mother-in-law, offering unsolicited advice that I, in my blindness, had often mistaken for genuine concern. Their presence in my life felt like a comforting anchor, or so I believed. The subtle shifts began after I shared the news of my latest financial triumph. Arthur, usually so laid back about money, started asking more pointed questions about my assets, my investments, and my will. He'd frame them as casual inquiries, always with that disarming smile, but there was an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite place. Beatrice, meanwhile, transformed from a benevolent matriarch into an almost obsessive presence, constantly bringing up my health, subtly nudging me towards more natural remedies and a new holistic diet, always emphasizing the importance of a clear mind and a healthy body for managing such immense wealth. Looking back, the signs were there, insidious little tendrils of avarice slowly coiling around me. I dismissed them as newfound interest, perhaps a touch of awe at the sheer scale of my success. How foolish I was, how utterly, tragically naive. I saw their eyes light up when I spoke of my portfolio, not realizing they were seeing dollar signs, not me. Our Hamptons estate, usually a haven of peace, began to feel observed. Little things like objects being slightly out of place, or hushed conversations abruptly ending when I entered a room. I attributed it to my growing paranoia, the stress of managing such a vast fortune. Arthur would often suggest a quiet evening in, insisting on preparing dinner himself, which was a rare and seemingly loving gesture. Beatrice would always be there, a silent observer, her eyes, I now realize, dissecting every move, every morsel. The ease with which I had lived, the comfortable certainty of my relationships, began to fray at the edges, almost imperceptibly. I found myself becoming more tired, a persistent weariness that no amount of rest seemed to alleviate. My appetite waned, and a dull ache settled in my stomach, a persistent companion I attributed to stress. They were slowly, methodically isolating me, chipping away at my vitality, preparing the ground for their ultimate betrayal. My perfect life was, in reality, a gilded cage, and I, the unwitting bird, was slowly being poisoned within its opulent confines. The irony, bitter and sharp, now cuts deep. The night of the betrayal began, as many of our evenings did, with a quiet dinner at home. Arthur had insisted on preparing my favorite, a rich seafood pasta, while Beatrice hovered, offering her usual unsolicited advice on ingredients and cooking methods. I remember feeling particularly exhausted that day, the persistent fatigue that had become my unwelcome companion weighing heavily on me. I watched them, seemingly a loving son and his caring mother, bustling about in my state-of-the-art kitchen, and a fleeting warmth, a sense of belonging flickered within me. How could I have been so wrong? The pasta was delicious, or at least that's how it tasted at first. A few bites in, a strange metallic tang began to creep onto my palate, almost imperceptible against the rich sauce. I paused, a flicker of unease stirring, but Arthur, ever attentive, was quick to distract me with a charming anecdote about his latest painting, his eyes twinkling with feigned innocence. Beatrice nodded in agreement, a slight, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. As I continued to eat, the metallic taste grew stronger, accompanied by a growing numbness in my mouth and a burning sensation in my throat. My vision blurred, and the elegant dining room, with its antique furniture and priceless artworks, began to spin. A wave of nausea crashed over me, followed by a searing pain in my stomach that doubled me over. I clutched the edge of the table, gasping for air, my mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. Arthur's face, which moments before had been full of feigned concern, hardened into a chilling mask of indifference. Beatrice, who had been watching me with an almost clinical detachment, stepped forward, a cold, triumphant glint in her eyes. "It's done, Arthur," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion, a stark contrast to the saccharine tones she usually employed. "She won't last the night." Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of pain. Poison. They were poisoning me. My husband, the man I loved, and his mother, whom I had welcomed into my home, were systematically ending my life for my wealth. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, more agonizing than the toxins coursing through my veins. I tried to scream, but my voice was a mere croak, my muscles already betraying me. I slid from my chair, collapsing onto the Persian rug, my body convulsing. Through blurry eyes, I saw them standing over me, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the chandelier, devoid of any remorse. Arthur reached down, his fingers surprisingly gentle as he checked for a pulse, a cruel parody of a concerned husband. "She's gone," he whispered, a note of triumph in his voice. "Just as planned." Beatrice simply stared, her expression as cold and unfeeling as polished marble. What they didn't know, couldn't have known, was that I had a rare genetic anomaly that made me exceptionally resilient to certain toxins. It was a secret I had kept, a quirk of my biology that had been discovered during a routine medical examination years ago, dismissed as a benign anomaly. The poison was potent, undoubtedly meant to be lethal, but my body, against all odds, was fighting back, albeit slowly. I was conscious, a tortured prisoner within my own failing body, hearing every word, feeling every agonizing tremor as they began to discuss their next steps, their voices muffled and distant. I heard Arthur talk about calling the paramedics, staging it as a sudden, tragic heart attack. Beatrice, ever the pragmatist, was already discussing inheritance lawyers and securing my assets. They truly believed I was dead, a mere obstacle removed from their path to immense wealth. As darkness finally consumed me, it wasn't death I felt, but a profound sense of icy resolve. I would not only survive, I would make them pay. The thought was a burning ember in the encroaching blackness, a promise I made to myself in the depths of my poisoned existence. My awakening was a slow, painful crawl back from the brink. I remember the sensation of being adrift in a vast, dark ocean, then the piercing, insistent glimmer of light, followed by the dull ache that permeated every inch of my being. The first thing I truly registered was the sterile smell of disinfectant and the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. I was in a hospital, a realization that brought with it a wave of confusion, quickly followed by a chilling surge of memory. Arthur, Beatrice, the pasta, the searing pain, their cold faces as they watched me fall. The medical team, a blur of kind but unfamiliar faces, initially believed I had suffered a severe anaphylactic shock, possibly from a shellfish allergy I was unaware of. They were puzzled by the lingering neurological symptoms, the profound weakness, and the slow, agonizing recovery. I played along, weakly confirming their theories, my mind already working furiously, piecing together the fragments of that horrifying night. My rare genetic anomaly, the one that had been dismissed as inconsequential, had saved me. It had slowed the absorption of the poison, giving my body a fighting chance. Lying there, tethered to machines, I listened as the nurses and doctors discussed my miraculous recovery, their voices hushed with a mixture of awe and bewilderment. I learned that Arthur had indeed called for an ambulance, putting on a convincing performance of a distraught husband. The police had been briefly involved, a perfunctory inquiry into a sudden medical emergency, quickly closed. They had gotten away with it, or so they thought. The moment I was strong enough to think clearly, I began to plan. I couldn't risk revealing my true state of awareness, not yet. My body was still too weak, my voice too fragile. I needed to recover fully to regain my strength, and more importantly, I needed to gather irrefutable evidence. I started by requesting my personal assistant, Sarah, to bring me my laptop and phone, citing work urgency. Sarah, a loyal and discreet woman who had been with me for years, expressed relief at my improving condition. I told her I wanted to work from the hospital to keep my mind sharp. What I was actually doing was accessing my financial accounts, cross-referencing recent transactions, and establishing new, untraceable lines of communication. I needed to build a fortress around my remaining assets, to ensure that if they made another move, they would hit a brick wall. My first call, made from a burner phone I had Sarah discreetly purchase, was to my longtime lawyer, Mr. Alistair Finch. Alistair was known for his sharp intellect and an almost Sherlockian ability to uncover hidden truths. I told him a heavily redacted version of events, enough to convey the gravity of the situation without revealing the extent of my resurrection. I explained that I suspected foul play, hinting at a deep-seated financial motive. He was skeptical at first, but his professional curiosity was piqued by my insistence on absolute secrecy and the specific, unusual requests I made. I instructed him to begin a forensic audit of all my marital finances, to dig into Arthur's past, and to discreetly monitor his and Beatrice's activities. I also initiated the process of severing all joint accounts, redirecting my vast wealth into new, impenetrable trusts, making sure Arthur would find nothing if he tried to access them. My physical recovery was slow, but my mind was sharper than ever, fueled by an icy, unwavering resolve. I began a rigorous, secret regimen of physical therapy in my hospital room, pushing myself even when every muscle screamed in protest. I studied legal precedents, delved into the intricacies of marital law, and consumed everything I could find on poisoning and forensic toxicology. I learned about the signs of slow poisoning, the cumulative effects, and the telltale markers. It explained the persistent fatigue, the nausea, the general malaise that had plagued me for months. They hadn't just tried to kill me once. They had been chipping away at me for a long time. The realization fueled my anger, hardening my resolve. This wasn't just about my wealth. It was about their monstrous betrayal, their callous disregard for a human life. I would not just reclaim my life. I would dismantle theirs. My every breath was now dedicated to this singular, chilling purpose. My recovery was complete, both physically and mentally. I had transformed from a vulnerable victim into a calculating strategist, every fiber of my being humming with anticipation. The day I walked out of that hospital, I was a ghost to Arthur and Beatrice, a specter they believed was long buried. My lawyer, Alistair, had been meticulously following my instructions, building a bulletproof case against them. He had discovered a series of large, unexplained cash withdrawals from Arthur's personal accounts in the months leading up to the poisoning attempt, as well as a suspicious life insurance policy he had taken out on me, naming himself as the sole beneficiary, just weeks before. Beatrice, it turned out, had a history of financial duplicity, having been involved in a minor inheritance dispute years ago that was quietly settled out of court. The pieces were falling into place, painting a damning picture of premeditated greed. The next step was to set the trap. I instructed Alistair to file for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and abandonment, knowing full well the shockwave it would send through their carefully constructed reality. The legal papers were served discreetly, ensuring they wouldn't discover my survival until the most impactful moment. I wanted to see their faces, that dawning horror, that sickening realization that their elaborate scheme had not only failed but was about to spectacularly backfire. Alistair, initially hesitant about the dramatic flair, ultimately agreed to my plan, recognizing the psychological advantage it would give us. He ensured the court date was set, a public forum where their treachery would be laid bare. The day of the divorce hearing arrived, crisp and bright, a stark contrast to the dark machinations that had brought us there. I chose my attire carefully. A sharp, impeccably tailored cream suit, my hair styled in a severe, elegant bob, and my face composed, betraying nothing of the churning emotions beneath. I wanted to project an image of unyielding strength, of a woman reborn, not a victim. Alistair and his team arrived early, their briefcases laden with meticulously prepared documents, forensic reports, and financial analyses. The courtroom was bustling with lawyers, clerks, and a smattering of curious onlookers, drawn by the whispers of a high-profile divorce from a prominent Hamptons family. Arthur and Beatrice walked in, their heads held high, an air of smug entitlement about them. Arthur looked noticeably more affluent, his suits sharper, his demeanor more confident than I remembered. Beatrice, draped in expensive jewels, exuded an air of righteous indignation, as if she were the wronged party. They scanned the room, their eyes dismissive, clearly expecting to encounter my empty seat, perhaps a proxy lawyer representing my estate. The air crackled with their unspoken expectation of an easy victory, a mere formality to secure my vast wealth. I watched them from the back, hidden from their immediate view, a predator observing its unsuspecting prey. As the judge called the case, Vance versus Vance, Arthur and Beatrice moved to their respective tables, their lawyer, a notoriously aggressive litigator, already preparing to argue for Arthur's rightful share of my assets. The judge began the proceedings, and then Alistair, with a subtle nod from me, rose. "Your Honor," he announced, his voice clear and resonant, "my client, Eleanor Vance, is present and wishes to address the court personally." A ripple went through the courtroom. Arthur and Beatrice, still facing the judge, stiffened. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they turned, their eyes sweeping across the gallery, searching. Their gazes landed on me, standing tall at the back, my expression unwavering. The transformation in their faces was instantaneous and profound. Arthur's jaw dropped, his eyes widening in disbelief, a mixture of terror and utter stupefaction seizing him. Beatrice's face, usually so composed, contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. They froze, utterly paralyzed, their mouths agape, as if confronted by a ghost, their carefully constructed world crumbling before their very eyes. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, broken only by the sharp intake of breath from those who witnessed their absolute petrified shock. The silence in the courtroom was shattered by the judge's sharp rap of the gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" The shock on Arthur and Beatrice's faces slowly morphed into a grotesque mixture of anger and desperation. Their lawyer, regaining his composure, quickly moved to object, sputtering about lack of notice and frivolous antics. But the judge, clearly intrigued by the dramatic turn of events, allowed Alistair to proceed. My lawyer, in his quiet, commanding voice, began to lay out our case, piece by excruciating piece. He started with the medical reports, detailing the specific toxins found in my system and the slow, insidious nature of the poisoning. He then presented the evidence of Arthur's suspicious life insurance policy, taken out without my knowledge, and the unexplained large cash withdrawals. As Alistair meticulously unveiled the layers of their betrayal, I watched Arthur and Beatrice, their initial shock giving way to a frantic, whispered argument between them. Arthur's face was a mask of panic, his usual charm completely evaporated, replaced by raw fear. Beatrice, ever the dominant force, seemed to be urging him to maintain composure, though her own hands, clutching her designer handbag, trembled visibly. The courtroom, once buzzing with murmurs, was now captivated, every eye fixed on the unfolding drama. Alistair called Sarah, my personal assistant, to the stand. Her testimony was precise and damning, recounting Arthur's increasingly pointed questions about my finances and Beatrice's obsessive focus on my health and diet. She detailed the unusual secrecy surrounding the meals Arthur prepared, and how Beatrice often helped him. Then came the financial forensics. Alastair presented irrefutable evidence that every single penny of my $800 million net worth had been acquired before my marriage to Arthur. My prenuptial agreement, initially dismissed by their lawyer as a mere formality, now loomed as an insurmountable fortress. Clause by clause, Alastair demonstrated that Arthur was entitled to absolutely nothing. Not a single asset, not a single investment, not even a share of the Hamptons estate, which was unequivocally listed under my sole ownership prior to our union. The air left Arthur's lungs with an audible whoosh. His face went ashen, the realization of his monumental miscalculation hitting him with crushing force. He had risked everything, including his freedom, for nothing. The prosecution, emboldened by my unexpected survival and the overwhelming evidence, swiftly moved for an arrest. The district attorney, alerted by Alastair, was present, observing the proceedings. The judge, after reviewing the evidence presented, had no choice but to issue warrants for their arrest on charges of attempted murder and conspiracy. The gavel fell with a final, resounding thud. The courtroom erupted in a controlled chaos of whispers and gasps. Two uniformed officers stepped forward, their faces grim, and approached Arthur and Beatrice. Arthur, pale and defeated, offered no resistance as the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. Beatrice, however, let out a piercing shriek, railing against the injustice, her composure finally shattered. "This is outrageous. You can't do this. We are innocent," she shrieked, struggling against the officers. But her protests were futile. As they were led away, their heads bowed in shame and defeat, Arthur caught my eye. His gaze was no longer arrogant or fearful, but filled with a profound, soul-deep despair. He had walked into my life empty-handed, and through his greed and his mother's machinations, he was now walking out of it not only empty-handed but into a future of legal battles, public disgrace, and almost certain imprisonment. My revenge was complete. It wasn't about malice. It was about justice. The cold, hard fact of their utter ruin, the shattering of their avaricious dreams, was a far more satisfying victory than any direct confrontation. I had reclaimed my life, my wealth, and my peace, leaving them to face the desolate emptiness of their own making. My story, while perhaps extreme, serves as a stark reminder. In a world often dazzled by success and wealth, the true nature of those closest to us can sometimes remain hidden, obscured by ambition and deceit. I learned in the most brutal way imaginable that trust must be earned, and that even in the most gilded cages, darkness can lurk. My experience taught me the invaluable lesson that self-preservation, when faced with such profound betrayal, demands an unwavering commitment to justice. May we all be vigilant, protect our peace, and understand that our greatest strength lies not just in what we build, but in our resilience when it's threatened.